Hi, I'm Pete Shau. You may know me from the RTO Show podcast, but today I'm doing something a little bit different. APRO and Wow Brands have launched a special project to bring the story of our industry to life like never before. They've asked me to sit down with some of the true legends of rent-to-own, capturing their stories, their impact, and their vision for the future. And now I get to share those conversations with you straight from the legends themselves. All of this leads to something groundbreaking, though. A new book, The Rent-to-Own Revolution, A Definitive History of Advocacy and Consumer Access, written by APRO CEO Charles Smitherman and Wow Brands CEO Ryan Krast. The book explores the grassroots of RTO, the advocacy that has defined it, and the future that we're building together. Here's where you come in. We're giving away free copies once the book is released. Just head over to the RTOLevolution.com and sign up for a chance to receive a copy in early 2026. Don't miss the chance to be among the first to hold this piece of RTO history. That's RTOLevolution.com. Check it out and become a part of RTO history. Hello and welcome to the RTO Show. I'm your host, Pete Shau, and today, something I kind of wanted to do, we kind of go back to the beginning and then come back here in a couple of different ways. Mike Tissot on the show again.
Second time, how about that? I must have done okay the first time, Pete.
Yeah. So this time it's a little bit different capacity, right? Because we're talking about the Legends series. And the Legends series, you cannot have a Legends series if you're not talking about Darrell Tissot. Like, he comes up in every conversation, in every way. I think he mentored the mentors almost. You know what I mean? And there's one of those things that he helped pioneer, he helped lead, he helped mentor, he helped grow businesses that weren't his own. He got you in it. I still remember that conversation when he told you it was time. Hey, you got to make that decision.
It was a hard sell, Pete.
And and then going along with that, you've done a great job, Mike. You have killed it on your own in what you do and how you do it.
Listen, it's not on my own. There's 504 people and an amazing team of leaders and my VPs, Mark, Judy and Ben and Rachel, and it's far from on my own. I feel like I'm just the conductor most of the time. I don't, the team I have, the managers we have are just, they're next level. The amount of care they have is just, it's insane.
I would never say that you don't have a great team, because listen, every time that we go with it, man, they are just killing it.
Yeah, they're killing it.
But you're right, though. You're a good conductor.
What do they say about the conductor? They say the key to the conductor is being willing to turn your back on the crowd, So
yes.
Maybe you make better decisions if you're willing to turn your back on the crowd, I guess.
Well, I think keeping your eye on the ball has been an amazing thing. And one thing that we wanted to do is we get a 2-for-1 on this one. We get to talk about Darrell Tissot, who left an amazing legacy here, and to be able to be on the Legends series with Mike, and then Mike gets to pass it along to us. We kind of get both sides of that story. Going back a little bit, and I didn't know this. You guys started out in a small service station. Is that right?
Yeah. It'll be hard for me to go through this without crying, but my dad was a crier and I'm a crier. My daughter's a crier. So you might get the bonus tier. My dad started his business on a baseball field, Pete. He was my little league baseball coach when I was 14 or 15, 1984-ish. And the other guy coaching was selling the big honking satellites. And he was getting stuff in the mail about rent to own. And he asked my dad what he thought of it. And my dad was an entrepreneur. Like, he was a builder, so, which means he literally was a builder. Like, when I was a little kid, we moved from house to house. He built a house. We moved to the next house. We'd live in that house that he built while he was building the house next door. And then once he built that house, we moved from this house to that house. And then he'd sell the house we moved out of. And then we literally moved 7 houses down a street because he built the next house. So that building was something he did, and helped my mother, who still runs her carpet business. It was always her business. He just helped her. She still runs it today at age 81, 6 days a week. Like, you want to know where I got my work ethic? It's there. But he was a builder, and so he built this company. And as kind of a lifelong entrepreneur too. He just always wanted to build something new and different. So when this other coach came to him and said, "Hey, what do you think about this rent-to-own thing?" He did some research and he said, "I don't know, why not try it?" and he was always willing to try new things. So 85, he and his partner at that time, and they weren't partners long, they just gave it a whirl.
What were some of the challenges starting that? Because if he knows business as far as like building the buildings next or building the houses next to him, that's where he's in. This is a whole different situation. He gets into a small, station. He opens up rent to own. Like, how does that translate as far as the funding and growing that?
Well, I mean, listen, the challenge for every new business owner is funding. And he had the 18% loans from Borg Warner, and he borrowed from everybody he could, or was told no from every bank in the town he lived in, and except for one who's still our bank today. Um, and he went to see bankers, and they would say, "Well, so let me get this straight. Our collateral is going to be spread all across the county. So how's that work?" And so that was a huge challenge, and forced them to be very good at collections because the nature of this business. We want to try to make money on the stuff we buy, and deciding how long to wait and how long not to wait is easier when you don't have money to go buy another VCR. And like so many that started in the 80s, it was VCRs. And dad did a few things early on. He had bigger stores, bigger square footage stores, and it was bigger than the norm because he really believed in the furniture business. He believed that the furniture business would be a big part of our business, and it wasn't in the early 80s. It was electronics and appliances. It was TVs, console TVs, and appliances. So that really helped kind of take off was his commitment to furniture. He went to the Tupelo furniture market, would buy big truckloads of stuff, even though he probably couldn't afford it, didn't know what he was going to do with it. But he kind of believed in stack it high and watch him buy, like let's just bring in loads of stuff, kind of a Sam Walton theory. Let's just bring in loads of stuff and I bet people will buy it. And so that was some of the things he started early on. And, I'd say the other thing was hard is just people understanding his leadership style, which was so much about giving people freedom to make choices and make decisions and a lot of rope. He was always like that. And we still have that today. So many decisions in our company are made at the store level, and that's all him. Nobody can make the decision from the home office. They need to make it at the store level close to the customer. The best decisions get made close to the customer. And so he always believed in that. And so finding people that like Diane Smalley, who still works with us today, who were willing to do that, that was hard because a lot of times folks want like, if A happens and B happens, do C, and we operate in so much gray area in this business, as you know, we just want to take care of customers. We want them to come back, and we want them to be customers for life, and we want them to tell their friends. And gosh, we've been around for 40 years. We got like 3 and 4 generation customers, and that's huge. And that's probably because of a lot of the things that he allowed employees to do early on, just taking care of customers.
So what did the first store look like? Because I've seen some of your stores. I've seen some of the videos. I've seen some of the pictures. I remember at one point in time we were doing that challenge where you took, and I loved it. You had a great idea. You wanted to show your store and what it looked like, and we did that challenge, and it was great. So describe to me what the first store looked like.
The first store was in a service station south of Hillsboro, Ohio, and it was concrete floors and 4 or 5 couches and 3 or 4 living room suites and a stack of VCRs. I mean, there wasn't a lot of money spent on the frills. I mean, the first store I opened in 1997, like I physically built the countertops, did the drywall, painted the store. Like that's
Oh,
the store
wow.
was all we just put it together ourselves. The drywall in the Circleville store, which is the first store I opened in '97, is pretty bad. I'm not a very good drywaller. I'm not bad at renting TVs, but you don't want me doing your drywall. Let me tell you. But we did all that stuff. That we did it all, and that's what the store looked like. It looked like we built the counters. It looked like we laid the carpet. It looked like we painted the paint job, and we put as much stuff in there as Dad put as much stuff in there as he could afford to buy. And when people rented it, if he had enough money left on the credit line, we bought more stuff.
You know, I was reading something that your dad tracked. Darrell Tissot was the one to track months to recover costs, and that's something that you still do
That's an
today.
old number. Not a lot of people do that. Yeah.
But you carry it through now.
I still do it. Yes, absolutely. We track so many. I track too many numbers. Data is my obsession. And but yeah, he would track months to recovery to how quick he would get his money back because that's when he would have enough money to go buy something else. And he was always a big Lotus 1, 2, 3 on those like 5 1/4 floppy inch discs that he'd put into that PC. And yeah, we still track that today. We don't recover our money nearly as fast as he used to.
Well, that's true. But I mean, everything costs the costs are changing every day. It's crazy. But you know, going back like those months to recover, something that you pulled with you. I see some principles here that he kind of had the foundation of what he did is how he grew things. One of the principles were if you take care of the people who take care of the customers get the best care. Describe that to
Yeah.
me and how you feel like that is today.
As the as the owner of my company, I know I have two jobs. The first job is to make it a great place to work, and and I would say 90% of everything I do, I try to figure out how to make it a better place to work. How do we make the benefits a little bit better? How do we make the compensation better? How do we make the empowerment that we provide for employees better? How do we make the training a little bit better? Always trying to find ways to make it a better place to work. And then also trying to find ways to make it a better place to shop. And I probably stole that from my mentor, Gary Fairman. He always talked about making it a great place to shop. And I think that's every owner's job. If we can make it a great, I mean, our folks are only going to treat our customer. I don't get to interact with customers very much. I have customers I love. I have customers like Anna Fent from Hillsborough, Ohio, that came in every Friday between 4 and 4:30 to make her payment, and she'd rent about 3 or 4 things until Christmas time, and then she'd use us to have access to 3 or 4 more things that she'd buy for presents for her kids, and then she'd pay them off the first of the year. And I have relationships with Brenda Shook in Lancaster, who every year says, "Hey, can you buy me some Halloween decorations?" And we say, "Sure, Brenda, because you've been around a long time." And then she'll bring me cookies and a flannel shirt. And I've met her 20 years ago. So I have a relationship with some folks, but I don't as much anymore. And so making sure our folks at the front lines have the authority, the willingness, the security to take care of customers makes the difference. It makes all the difference. And we don't have a regional manager team, which is amazing. Rachel and Ben lead an amazing team of regional managers, and some have been doing it a long, long time. I would be remiss to say that Jeff Borders is not a dinosaur. He's just the oldest regional manager. He reminds me he's not a dinosaur. And their job is not to log in and do stuff. Their job is to direct and coach and help people make good decisions in stores. So if there's one philosophy, if there's 2 philosophies that have flown through my dad to me, it's, hey, keep trying new products, because it was furniture before furniture was cool. And then it was laptops before laptops was cool. And then it was all in on gaming before gaming was a big deal. And then our tire business is next level, and people have started and stopped and not even tried it. And then allowing folks to make decisions for our customers. Those are 2 things that drive the success of our business 40 years later. I got 40 years on the side of my hat. 40 years. We've been in business 40 years. So
And that tells a tale. That
it
tells a tale.
does. I think that the tale it tells is our business is a valuable transaction for a lot of people. If a small town entrepreneur that was laying carpet and building houses could get with another guy that he was coaching a baseball team with and open a business, and it's still here 40 years later, that means we're doing something pretty incredible for customers, right? We're providing access to products that they didn't have access to. My dad told this story, and it brought tears to his eyes when he told it. He told about the story from Lynchburg, this guy from Lynchburg, Ohio, that he thinks was one of the first people that paid out a washer and dryer. And they said, "Mr. Tissot, thank you so much for opening this store. We would have never had a chance to own our own washer and dryer. We've been going to laundromat for 20 years. We would have never had a chance to own our own washer and dryer. And it saved us so much time. It saved us so much money. We thank you so much for opening this store." Like, that's what we do here. And it's super cool.
Looking at some of the things that he brought forth, the way he was able to do it, the people he was able to touch on both sides of the coin, because it's not just the customers. He's touched a lot of employers, a lot of employees, a lot of owners, a lot of entrepreneurs in a ways that they're thankful for. Over the years, they're really thankful.
He became very, very, I mean, he was a very jolly man. He was probably real life Santa Claus, honestly. But he became very loyal to the industry very quickly, because he believed that the people he met in the industry helped him thrive, survive, and became confidants, and he was so willing to give back. And I had a full circle moment about a month ago, and you had Ben Leach on here, and Ben came out to visit me for a couple of days. And it was like, oh, wow, this business, it's not fourth generation, but like my dad was kind of a mentor to Ben's dad, and Ben's dad, Len, was absolutely a huge mentor to me. And now I have a chance to be a mentor to Ben. And like, whoa, like that's cool. Like I literally was like, I think my dad would be proud of me for helping Ben out, you know?
I think so.
Because is there anything else we want in life than our dads to be proud of us? Really? I mean,
Honestly, we were talking about that not that long ago about the basic necessities of what we need, and that was one of the top three. We want approval from our
yes.
parents. You're a guy. You want approval from your dads because you just want to do right. Which leads me to the second principle: small towns and small county seat, or well, small towns and county seat strategy. Can you explain that to me?
I grew up in a small town, Hillsboro, Ohio. It was about 40 minutes east of Cincinnati. And we're lucky, Ohio is pretty densely populated. So these small towns they're Walmart towns. There's 6,000 people living in the town, and about 35 or 30 in the county. And the county's probably the shopping area. And he believed that like these small towns needed access, these customers needed access to furniture and appliances and anything else we could provide. And he was right. He was right. There was, there probably weren't Walmarts back then, and there definitely isn't Best Buys, or there isn't, a ton of, mom and pop furniture stores. And so when we opened in Hillsboro and Washington Courthouse and Maysville, Kentucky, and Waverly, Ohio, and Jackson, they're all 6,000, 7,000 population towns with 30 to 40,000 in the county. And we were well received, and we could really provide an amazing service to folks in those counties that they didn't want to drive an hour and a half to work with somebody they didn't know. I mean, in those communities, people are more likely willing to do business with somebody they know. And you also, word of mouth travels faster and probably more richly. That when we provided the level of service, the level of service that we provide in rent to own, like I think it gets lip service because we all in this business know about it, but we deliver it for free, like for free. Like some of the sectionals we're delivering for free now, Pete. Like we shouldn't be like it's like 18 pieces, and there's so much trash that goes back in the truck, and we set that washer and dryer up for free. We provide those hoses for free. Like Lowe's doesn't do that. Like
No.
there are so many customers because we do it for free. And I think the other thing today, as we evolve into 2025, it's like that the relationships we have are so strong because we have done so much for our customers and their mothers and their fathers and their grandfathers that we're okay in today's virtual transaction because they trust us enough to say, hey, what's the best washer and dryer you have? And we say, oh, we got this new Samsung 8000 series. Okay, bring that to me tomorrow. Okay. Like we have built that level of trust that just tends to flow in a small town. And so it's definitely our people. Our people connect with people in small towns, and most of our people are from small towns. And a lot of our employees were once customers, or I looked up once before and shoot 20.14% of our employees were related to somebody else that worked for us. So it's a rich, thick culture we've created. But the small towns, it's just who we are. And our story plays better there. And I think because the level of service is more appreciated, maybe.
I was thinking the same thing. I think that in the smaller towns, it's more appreciated because not only the variety of what we carry, it's almost like a one-stop shop where you can go and get, all kinds of things. It's the fact that you're in a small town, people appreciate it more. I don't have to go all the way out to this big city to get this service.
And we're lucky that we have a lot of managers that have been managing their stores for a long time. I've a manager in Maysville, Kentucky that's been a manager there for 28 years, Mike Highfield. And so they just call Mike. It's not, I got an idea from Richard Rose, God rest his soul, and Ron and John. And he had, I feel like I could make a list of one or two ideas from I've gotten from every rent-to-own dealer in America. But they had their manager's name on the front door, like manager Mike Highfield, and the store hours as part of that. And we did that. And then we had each manager give us their quote. So I don't remember whether they did that or not, but we do that. So they have to come up with their quote, their like personal mantra.
Oh, I love it.
But having managers that have been there for 10 years or 12 years or four, we don't have a lot of manager turnover at all. And that really helps with customers just trusting us. And you don't get that at retail stores. And that level of
Yeah.
trust, I think, magnifies the rent to own transaction, the free delivery, the no credit check. That we are so willing to give customers chances after chances and access to products that they just don't typically get, because in those small towns with managers that have been around a long time, it's literally business on a handshake, and that's just not possible in a lot of places.
We're talking about, some of the products that we don't have access to in the Samsung 8000s. Principle 3,
I just for the record, I
think
made
bigger.
that model number up. I learned a long time ago, if you say things with conviction, I have no idea whether they have an 8,000 model.
Well, I'll tell you what, I don't either, but I will tell you that I know Samsung's has some great
They
products
deserve.
out there. And, sometimes it is a little bit out of our reach, and we do bridge that gap very well, especially if you really want to take care of your community. So, you know, Dad was talking about thinking bigger. He said principle number 3 was think bigger. Products, area, what we do, how we do it. Can you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's I everything I give you, Pete, has been stolen from somebody. Like I read a lot. I think started reading a lot more a decade or so ago, and I listen to a lot of podcasts. But I think it comes back to you know maybe I'll give Cam Kiger, one of our regionals, some credit for really pushing this. It's the people and the process and the products and figuring out ways to continue to drive those 3 Ps. Um, if we can continue to educate, keep our people curious, and keep them teachable, and keep training them on leadership skills as well as on product knowledge, we're going to get better. If we can keep testing and trying new products, and then one of the things I talk about a lot, Pete, is we again, it's stolen from somebody, so I apologize to whoever I got this from. That focus on your strength and address your weaknesses. And I think it's easy to look at your weaknesses, and we look at weaknesses in store X is not renting enough of this. Um, but I think what we do a better job of now in our company is focusing on our strength, which is the Salem, Ohio store rents desktop gaming really well. How do you pour gas on that? Like, how do you
Yes.
take a product that's
Yes.
doing really well and pour gas on it? And that means more product. That means better merchandising. That means better marketing. That means better education. That means, get maybe an incentive program to sell more, whatever it is. But those are the envelopes that we tend to push is with really trying to pour gas on some things. And then the processes would be technology. I mean, I'm so lucky to have a partner in Wow Brands that can help me push technology in so many different directions. Whether it's the CRM we work together to create, whether it's online leads that we get a high level of, whether it's paid leads or non-paid leads, whether it's a new special order platform that they've built for me. Like that's how we're going to use AI this year and next year to not just help us Google better, but also be our thought partner. So those are, I mean, that's definitely technology is a huge place for us to accelerate our business.
Well, you said something that really stood out to me. That you said your ideas are unoriginal. You read a lot. You do a lot of podcasts. Listen, it takes somebody important, and it's a difficult thing to do, but to be able to do it. I was doing an interview with Will Jackson, and he said the same thing. He's like, "Hey, we read a lot. We kind of regurgitate it in a different way, but it's all done." And he was told, and I love this, and we use this to this day. It makes you an information broker. There are people that haven't heard it, they haven't read it, and they don't know what you're about to say. And when you say it with your spin and how you do it, that was the first time they heard it, and that makes it special to
Yeah, and
them.
I feel like a book, or podcast, your podcast. My friend Ryan Hawk has an amazing podcast I listen to all the time, and I told him the other day. I said I feel like you just introduced me to people. You would
Yes.
introduce me to ideas and books, and it's my job to pursue those and to try to dig deeper.
Well, I have this rule, and I've said it before, and I'll say it a couple of times now, is that every time somebody recommends a book, I will try to pick one book out of their recommendation and read it. So every time you go down your book list, you have like 8 books. So I'm going to have to figure out one from you to just get down. I literally just emailed Michael Bennett a couple of days ago, and I was like, "Hey, listen, we talked. You had mentioned a lot of good books, and I think that I want to read one." And he kind of nailed it down to a couple of, like 4 or 5. Um, and I'm really going to read into it and go into it, and I really appreciate him doing that. Um, but getting back to it, Dad had a famous quote: "If you're not growing same store sales, then you're not doing business. You have no business adding stores." And I've heard you say that before.
Yeah, I've been around this business a long time now, and I've seen a lot of companies come and go and thrive and then not thrive. And I think it's, store count's something, it's absolutely a thing. And it's one way to maximize your revenue. But if you're not growing your stores you have, then there's a problem inside the stores that you have to address before you make more of them. And we're blessed to have grown same store sales every year. And we keep opening stores. We have a new one we're going to open in the first quarter, and very, very slow, very strategic. We got to have a good lease. We got to have somebody to run it. It's got to be geographically connected to one of our other stores. You're not gonna find any of our stores that are in an outlying area way too far away from another store. It just doesn't work for me that way. But if we are not growing same, Dad had a lot of quotes, right? He had, if you're not growing same store sales, you had no business opening stores. One of the things I tend to reference a lot is, talking about, team members that may be underperforming where we have high expectations, and he would say either they don't know or they don't care, either of which I have a little problem with. If they don't know, we can help teach them. If they don't care, that's a whole nother deal. And so, we know that the success of Countryside Rentals Rent to Own has everything to do with the massive amount of people that care an awful lot.
You know, Talking about the growth in the same store sales, usually those quotes and sayings came from something that happened that you go, I learned my lesson. Is there something that happened back in the beginnings where, you and Darrell were like, hey, this is something that kind of came back and bit us, and I need to make sure I work this out before I move on?
No, I don't. We've not had any major business snafus. I made a few mistakes when I came. I worked for Dad when I was in college in the summers, and then was able to just go back to school. And we opened a store to get ready to use merchandise, and that was all it was going to do, and that was stupid. But he let me make that mistake. He was really good at letting people make their mistakes and learning from them. Maybe a lot better than I am. But nothing major. I think it was always, he was very frugal, and the cost of money when he started was high, and it was a struggle, right? I mean, the founder of every rental owned business that you talk to, it was a struggle, and I wasn't a part of the struggle. I was a kid, but I'm aware of the struggle, and so I think that ultimately was what it is. Like, don't overextend yourself because it could get hard again. And we were lucky that we grew same store sales, and we, got out of debt and were able to kind of move forward. But, I don't think he ever wanted to be beholden to Borg Warner again because it was hard.
There is something that I noticed when we're going through all this. He didn't like gold numbers on the walls of the store, right? There was no reminders in that type of way. And I remember that a lot of people do that. They have like, you want 30 deliveries, and they'll post it in the bathroom, and they post it in the employee room and stuff like that. What made his decision to not go that way?
There were goals. Maybe they were silent. Maybe they were secret. Maybe they were written on a napkin somewhere.
Right.
But there were goals. I think there's a difference between goals and standards, though. And I think that the 40 years later, I think we have been reminded of that at our company. You can set a goal, but there's a big difference between setting a goal and establishing standards. Like we have standards at Rent to Own, that we're always going to deliver this much, and we're always going to close here, and we're always going to, collect this way, and we're always going to have our inventory in this shape. And we know when we do those things, we run great stores. And so I think that he was also of the belief, if you maintain good standards, whatever your standards happen to be, that, people want to work there and people want to shop there. And again, that's what we're trying to do. That's, to steal Simon Sinek, who Chris Kale, thank you, Chris, accuses me of just quoting Simon all the time. The infinite game is real. Like, there's no finish line. Like, we have hit so many goals in our business, and every time I hit one, it's like, wow, that wasn't nearly as exciting as I thought it would be. Right? it's the journey, and it's a journey you get to have with your friends that work for you. And that's the journey you get to have in this business with all your mentors and all your colleagues, and with Angie and her family at Mike's Rent to Own, and Lynn and Gary. And like, we get to bounce everything off everybody, and I've been lucky to be involved in all that stuff, as I've been a part of the industry. But we have goals. We have big goals, and there's usually a bonus tied to it too, Pete.
Well, uh, the goals are great. Goals are always helped push you to the next level. I would imagine that as soon as the first rent-to-own store opened, the goal was open 2 and 3 and 4. And I know now it's probably a little bit different than opening those first few because, I mean, when you have 40 something stores, you have a basis, you have people already in place. You only want to grow when you can. But when you only have 1 or 2 stores, you have to grow because you have needs, you have wants, you want to get out there more. How hard was it to grow then versus now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm aware of the struggle, and I've heard the stories. When I came in, we had 10 stores, and Dad was trying this hocus pocus idea of like, I'm going to give a manager 49% ownership of a store, and I'll own 51. Kind of his pseudo franchising. I don't even know what it was, but it was a mess. And we abandoned that pretty quickly. Again, I think it's absolutely surrounding access to cash early on. Early on, it's how do I buy more VCRs? And if in all of your conversations with all the legends, like, there's talk of debt everywhere. And debt is
Yes.
debt can be powerful to lift a business up, and it can be a powerful weight to pull a business down. And so I think every business's goal early on is to get out of debt. And I think once that happens, then you can be more, not beholden to a banker, or not beholden to other stockholders that want a dividend. And you can now only be beholden to your customers and your employees. Then it's powerful. If your shareholders are literally just your employees and your customers, you've eliminated a third of what every business has to deal with. And my goodness, you can make better decisions. So I think that's what inevitably happens over time for successful businesses, or can happen.
Hey everyone, it's Pete Shau here from the RTO Show podcast, and I want to tell you about a company that's making a real difference in the rent-to-own space, Wow Brands. I've seen firsthand how they approach marketing. Let me tell you, it's not just about ads. Wow Brands builds complete digital ecosystems designed specifically for the rent-to-own industry. Their e-commerce and lead generation strategies are built to bring in qualified leads. And did I mention that they are actively working with the rent-to-own industry while also being members of APRO and TRIB? Listen, these folks are passionate problem solvers. They don't just slap something together. They design, build, and scale the kind of digital retail tools your business needs and your customers actually want. So if you're serious about growing, reach out to Wow Brands at wowbrands.com. I trust them, and I think you will too. Well, as Mrs. Windsor would call it, OPM, or other people's money. She did not want to owe it, and neither did her husband. It was a great conversation. Talking about some of the things that he's done in the past, your dad had an accolade of all kinds of things, all kinds of accolades. So he was the APRO board of directors from 1991 to 1999, with 8 years of service, which was, you were around for that then.
Yeah, I was around for that. Like I said earlier, he was such a giver, and he knew that the industry gave him so much that even if they didn't, he would give back because it was just the human he was. And so he was president of both APRO and TRIB, and loved every minute of it. He was president of TRIB for 2 years. I think he was around president of APRO for a couple of years. And on the board, there's some great pictures of him and Tiger and Shannon and Ernie and all those guys that year, and had some great friends, him and Kevin Quinn and Ted Wilson, and used to play golf. And Dick Eichland would play golf together, and they'd share ideas, and it was a fantastic, I think, friendship and camaraderie he had. But let me tell you, he believed in the TRIB buying group like nothing else, and he believed in what can we do to get together and have strength through unity and buy from the same vendors, because it was hard to get vendors to want to buy from us in the early 80s. And if we all get together and we all buy from the same vendors, then we'll mean more to them. and it'll be better for all of us. And so, I mean, he pushed a lot when he was involved in the board and as the president to like really, really wanting to force people to buy from TRIB. And people didn't like that because they run their own company. But like he and Slats and John Blair was the president, was the executive director at the time, were like, they wanted people to report what percentage of your purchases came from the TRIB dealer. Like, you need to be honest and tell us what you're not buying from TRIB, because you need to buy from TRIB. And he waved that TRIB flag probably until the day he couldn't wave a flag anymore.
Well, I mean, he's done a lot more. President's Award of Excellence in 2000. He had the Ernie Talley Lifetime Achievement Award in 2004. I mean, what did these awards mean to him? Kind of through your lens, what did it mean for him to be able to be recognized by all these peers and all this?
This is the part you're going to make me cry, Pete. They didn't mean anything to him. That's not why he did it. They didn't mean anything to him. And they didn't until the day he died on June 26th. They didn't mean anything to him. What meant something to him was the lives he was able to touch, of the people who worked at Rent to Own, of the people he was able to touch that worked in the Rent to Own business, of the friendships he made. My goodness. He called his buddy Ted Wilson and asked Ted to come work with us for a week and figure out if he needed to keep working at Rent to Own or he could retire, if I was okay to run it. That's what meant something to him. It was just that. It was sitting at the picnic table with young Lynn Leach and telling him what he knew about Rent to Own. The awards didn't mean anything to him. And that may not be what you want to hear, but that's the truth.
Everybody's different. It's one of those things that I think he sounds like somebody who would have just been humble enough to be around the people that he helped get to where they were and helped him get to where he was. And that was enough.
It was.
The accolades along the way does mean a thing, though. I would mean something to me. Hey, this guy's really doing a good job.
Didn't mean anything to him. He couldn't tell you where the trophies are.
So talk to me about the Ohio Rental Dealers Association, because we've talked about APRO, we talked about TRIB, we talked about his accolades in there. Was that something that he was in as much as you are?
Absolutely. We are lucky in the state of Ohio. We've always had a good nucleus of rent-to-own dealers who would do whatever needed to be done, to fight if we needed to fight or go somewhere if we needed to go somewhere. And it was Dad and Ernie and Gary for years. I mean, those three guys, whatever needed to happen, getting the bill passed or going to DC, it was Dad and Gary and Ernie. And it was like the three amigos, they had a nice frenemy-ship for a long time, and they got along great and did what we needed to do in Ohio. And today it's not that different. Ernie's, still got stores in Ohio, and Keith Fairman is running that company, and Joe Fisher and Randy have Eagle Rent to Own. And we just have a good little nucleus of 4 or 5 rent to own guys and gals that run good businesses in Ohio. And so we've done our dead level best to make sure we're protected and make sure we have good friends in DC and in Columbus. I'm lucky that I've been able to establish relationships with some folks in DC and in Columbus. And my dad encouraged me to do that. We would go to DC when he was involved. And maybe the 9-hour car drives to DC were the best part, in hindsight. Maybe it was the drive, maybe it was the ride, not the visits. I remember going to Monticello for an event, probably 98 or so, which was really super cool. But he taught me. He had a relationship with Mike DeWine, who's the now governor, who was a senator at the time. That how having those relationships are important. And so I've continued to forge those. A senator from Ohio, is a good friend and has been into our rent-to-own stores and knows exactly what we do for customers. There was a gentleman, Zach Space, who was a Democrat from middle of Ohio, and we collectively, about 10 of us, went and helped do calls for him back, 10 years ago probably. He was a great friend. Steve Stivers from Columbus came and spoke at an APRO event in DC. He was a great friend. And I think it's important for people to understand what we do for customers and how our transaction really works. And so I've always been, because my dad taught me, let's invite congressmen, senators, state, local into our stores and let him meet some customers and see exactly what we do. And we've done that forever.
What was one of the things that stood out? He did so much. He did a lot in APRO. He did a lot in TRIB. But when you're talking about the RDA, that's the legal stuff. That's the stuff that can really shut us down. What's something that you could remember that dad was a part of that you can be like, I'm so glad that I had a part in that, or I saw it, or I heard about it.
Well, he was around during the Henry B. Gonzalez days. You've heard about that, and so being classified as as a lease and federal credit sale is bigger than anybody in this industry really realizes. That's not been around a long time. So he was part of that group with Wayne Chambers and Ted Wilson, whoever else was there in the late '90s, early mid '90s, to make sure that we were protected in that way. And while it still gets talked about at times, it's important to talk about. And I think the way that our state law in Ohio, he was part of that being built, where we have price controls, we have certain things that we are regulated to do and to not do, and we do everything by the book. And so putting that in place, him and Gary and Ernie getting that in place in the early '80s, provided this ability for us all to do business peacefully. And every lease you sign, there's a clause that says quiet enjoyment, and that's what we all want. It's just quiet enjoyment where we can provide great products to our customers that don't typically have access to them, and in a way that keeps them coming back and wants them to tell their friends. And we keep doing it and try to do it for 40 years, right? Just keep going. That's the goal of business, is just to stay in business. The infinite game, Pete.
Talking about all these people that were involved, where did the Midwest Expo come from?
Now, that's Ernie Llewellyn too, man. I mean, he decided we should do it. And so, again, there's this faction of Ohio dealers with UHR and Showplace and I, and now Eagle, that, if we all decide we're going to do something, we can pull it off. Because everybody, we may disagree and commit, but we commit. And so the Expo over the last, 15 years has become like the third largest rent-to-own event in the country. And there's 200 people that show up every year. Showed up again last year. Keith took over as the president of Ohio Rental Dealers and did an amazing job. Found a new venue and has great training. And our vendors, my gosh, Pete, our vendors step up to show up and do training. There's a work distribution center in Columbus, and they show up all the time. Almo Distribution shows up all the time. Ashley shows up. Symbol Mattress used to show up, and now the other group shows up. So it's, we're so lucky we have vendors that are willing to support that. But it was always about training, and I think because it was designed like that we do it in October, September, and it was always about, let's train our folks, our people that sell the stuff, how to sell more stuff. And it had a good purpose, and we had enough people committed to it that it survived, and it continues to just it does well. People show up, and every time they leave there, vendors or dealers are like, wow, that was cool. And I guess if you get that, you're doing a good job.
Well, your dad's part of a very select few that, it's just, the legacy is amazing. What do you think makes him the best mentor? Made him a great mentor? Made him somebody that everybody went to?
I think he cared. I think he cared. My dad passed away from Alzheimer's this year, and before he got sick, the last 4 or 5 years before he got sick, every time I would go see my dad, I'd get ready to leave, and he'd be like, "You sure ready to leave? You sure want to leave?" Like, my dad loved me, and he would literally put his hands on my shoulders, and he'd get about 6 inches from my face, and he would say, "You know how proud I am of you, don't you?"
Wow.
Yeah, like every time, Pete. And so I think that to be a mentor, to be a legend in this industry or any other, you have to be selfless, and you have to be humble, and that's just who he was, man. And he was always willing to give credit. He didn't need any credit. He didn't want those awards. One of the reasons he wanted to be in the rent-to-own business, Pete, is because so other people could be the front man, so other people could get the credit. He didn't want to be he wanted you to come rent from the Circleville Rent to Own to rent from Amy, not from Darrell Tissot. He was just the owner. He wasn't going to be the face of anything, Whereas my poor mother, who runs Tissot's Home Center, is the face of everything.
Did he have a specific tactic that he used as a mentor? Was there something different than the way he approached it versus other people that everybody seems to mention his name? And I know you said caring, but was there a certain way that he did it? Was he like blatantly straightforward? Was he nurturing? Like what
Oh,
was
I
the
would I would absolutely say very nurturing and but also extremely objective. I mean, he was, to go back to like the months to recover cost. Like, he was very nurturing. He was a great listener, which all of us can do a better job of. And he was also very objective. So it would be like, okay, here's where you are now. And if you deliver this much and you pick up this much and you pay out this much, you can grow this much. And if your APA goes from here to here, you can do this. And like, it wasn't just pie in the sky. It was backed in math. And so I think the combination of like caring and love and appreciation and like objectively, this is what's possible. Let me show you how to get there. Was the magical combination, really.
How do you see his legacy and his mentorship living on past his years today?
Hmm. It's a lot of pressure. I think
Yeah.
I think it's my responsibility, right? And I'm blessed that you allow me to do this and talk about my dad a lot. But it just will. It just will because I've listened to the podcast and I've heard him mentioned by Lynn and John Blair and just yeah, it's just he used rent to own as his platform. You hear people. This is going to sound crazy. I've never said this piece, Pete, but you hear some of our athletes that we covet and look at and put on these pedestals and we talk to them but some of the ones that are humble, the Tim Tebow's of the world, like him or hate him. I mean, he's a pretty interesting guy, right? He says
Yes.
football was his platform, and so I think Rento ended up being part of my dad's platform. It was the journey he was meant to go on, and it became part of his platform. And so, he leveraged that platform to help as many people as he could come in contact with. One of my favorite quotes ever, and I have a bracelet that I wear. It says "table," and the quote is, "If you're more fortunate than others, you should build a bigger table, not a bigger fence." And that's my dad. He
Wow.
just kept building a bigger table. It's just like he carried around leaves. He's like, let me put another leaf on the table, then sit down. Let me put another leaf
Yeah.
on the table. Tiger, sit down. Let me put another leaf in the table. Like that's just what he did.
If you were to ask everybody in your mind, this is a mental question, and you think you took a tally of everybody, what do you think everyone, including yourself, would say his biggest impact on the industry was? What do you think his greatest impact on the industry would be?
I think his greatest impact on the industry is he showed a lot of people what was possible. I think that he forged a path that said, look at what you could do. Like it's possible to have stores of this volume. It's possible to give more away in bonus. It's possible to be successful renting these types of products. Like it's possible. I heard Ben say it. He was a big "what if it works" type of guy too. Like we were always willing to try new stuff, and and I think that's maybe one of the legacies he'll have and like lives in me is like we can do better. We can do more. We can do better. We're always becoming. We've never arrived. And I think he always believed that we could always continue to grow, not just grow BOR potential or whatever, but grow.
Yeah, right. I mean, well, you have one of these unique views. What was it like working alongside your father all these years? I mean, this is a unique individual. He's a pioneer. He's a mentor. He gets the accolades. Does it even mean anything because he is so about the industry. He's about family. He's about showing others. What was it like working alongside of him?
I didn't get to do it very long, Pete. So I got to do it when I was a kid, and when I came back in 1997, we really only worked together for 2 years because he wanted to retire. There's a lot of folks I think to struggle to retire, and he did not. He was excited to do it. He had a long honey-do list that never shrunk, and he was wanting to take up his golf habit and did an amazing job. He was a great retiree. So interestingly, um, it wasn't all a bed of roses working with him, because what he thought was important and what I thought important was different at times. We got in the biggest argument over a fire safe file cabinet. Like, that was the largest. Why would you buy a file cabinet that's not fire safe? Like, it was like a big deal, Pete. And so I I think that Angie and Michael are so lucky they get to work with their dad. And I think Gary and Keith are lucky they get to work with each other. And Lynn and Ben are so lucky they get to work with each other. And John was so lucky he got to work with his dad. And so I got to work with my dad a couple years, but that was the way it worked for us. You know, it was he was done, and he wanted me to work, and he gave me a couple years to work out some kinks, and then he rode off into the sunset. And then he forgot he didn't even know how many stores we had, Pete. And that was before he had Alzheimer's. He'd be like, how many you got now? Like, he just didn't care after that. He was done. I told you he was a builder. So he built it, and then he was like, I'll let somebody else run it. I don't want to really run it. I just want to build it.
How did you manage continuing his legacy and blazing your own path in that situation, in that time frame where you're coming off and kind of starting off on your own? How did you manage that?
You know, managed it through a bunch of people that care an awful lot. I managed it through, Ben Davis, and I managed it through Diane Smalley, and I managed it through my relationships with my mentors. And that's how we all did it. That's how any business owner does it. I don't think is it rent to own specific? Sure. Because guess what? There's not a lot of industries that everybody talks about everything. Like, there's not, I could got a text group of 7 or 8 rent to own operators that, it gets hit once a week. I got great friends that work at Rent-A-Center, great friends that work at Aaron's, and great friends that, it's fantastic to have all these colleagues that we can share ideas with. But I think I was taught by my dad to just be willing to try new things. And so we were lucky enough to be on the forefront of computer rentals, and it really took off for us. We were lucky enough to be on the forefront of the gaming business, just console business, really all in on the console business. So we've always been a pioneer on trying new things. And I got that from my dad for sure, because he would always be willing to try it. And I think that a lot of times the new things are home runs, and a lot of times they're singles or doubles or triples, and they all add up, and they add up as either a home run sometimes, like doing tires in a rent-to-own store or renting laptops in 99 or 2000, or they add up as a single, or they add up as an experience that we learned from, because we've made our share of mistakes for sure. And it's not just products. It's, I've not made a mistake, like you asked, have you made a major staff? Like, no, we're lucky enough. We closed one store that we didn't love, that we ended up buying a couple Rent-A-Center stores, and, they bought that store. And so it didn't hurt us, but we've not made any major mistakes, but we just keep trying other things. I read somewhere once, Pete, that somebody said if you had more than 3 or 4 stores, one of them should be a laboratory. And I think that we continue to try to put stuff in the laboratory all the time.
Yeah, I like that idea. I love that idea. Coming to the end of this amazing story that you've had about your dad and everything, something that's unique to you and something that you've done was the 40th anniversary. You did the 40 Days of Kindness. Talk to me about that.
Well, I mean, that's my dad. And, my dad would say that his rent-to-own business took off when he started giving 10% to the church. And I think the rent-to-own stores in small towns can become a great community partner. And we either choose to or we don't. I've been lucky enough to get involved with a lot of schools. Somehow, some way, we ended up getting some football uniforms for our local school. There's not a lot of business around it. And then 3 or 4 other football teams heard we did it. And so they all wanted us to get them football uniforms. So we did it. But I don't know. 40 years to me is a long time. And I know a lot of the legends you've interviewed have been around for 40 years. But a lot of things have to go right to make it 40 years. And so it just felt like a really good way to give back and celebrate that by identifying a charity in each of our 40 stores that we could give back to. And whether it was, a food pantry that we support in Bainbridge, Ohio, called J216 Ministries, which is an amazing organization that Judy May, who works for me, is now on their board. or whether it's Camp Dovetail that my dad had supported for decades. It's a camp for developmentally disabled people, adults, humans, superstars. But we wanted to take that further into all of our markets. And some stores didn't do it as well as we want, but we're trying harder to be a better corporate citizen. And as we get bigger, it's harder to do because you don't hear. I know in Hillsborough, Ohio, or in Loveland, Ohio, or Bainbridge, Ohio, where we can help people. And I think with that we've done a better job of being able to hear, where we can help people a little bit more. An interesting story, and I think we should bring it back, Pete. We used to do it Employee of the Year at APRO. And in 2008, one of our customers won the Employee of the Year, and her name is Kim Royal. Kim Royal works for a kind of rehabilitation center in Lawrence County, Ohio. And she came to us as a customer. She's a great customer. She's been a customer for a long time. Ask us, hey, can you help me provide some of these basic needs for some of these folks in this halfway house? And so we would support them at Christmas time and all throughout the year, really, for like toiletries and towels and things like socks and underwear, stuff like that. But she was named APRO Customer of the Year in 2008. And it was super cool to see that happen, to see how we, can transform lives by providing products that customers don't have access to. But B, that transforms itself into being a better community, better member of the community. So I guess I would challenge every rent-to-own operator to find ways to listen to our customers a little bit more and find ways where we could do 40 days of giving or 3 days of giving or maybe a couple times a year. So we were looking for more opportunities to do it, and celebrating the 40 years of operation, it just seemed very logical to do that. And I think Dad would have put his arms on my shoulder and said he was proud of me for doing that.
I agree. I got to say, Mike, it's been a pleasure having you on. I love the idea of the 40 days. I love seeing your success. I love seeing your passion for the business. It seems like your father had helped you gain that, pass that along to you. You guys have a love for this business that I haven't seen ever. I got to say, I wanted to tell you, I was talking to the Strongs, Mike Strong and the family, and said, I got to thank you. You were one of the very first people that came on the podcast when I didn't know what direction I was going to go in.
I remember
And you
meeting
really
you at
helped me out with
APRO, and
that.
you were like speaking for the first time. You're like,
Yeah, I was out of I was scared. I was out of my mind. But you know what? You did exactly what your father did, and you kind of helped me through that. You kind of give me some pointers, and you embraced me a little bit with that, with the direction. And I really appreciate that. I wanted you to know that. And I want you guys to know that we appreciate you listening and being a part of the Legends series with us. If you want to hear more stories like Mike Tissot, Darrell Tissot, and their family and what's going on, you've got to dial in. Make sure you subscribe. You can go on to the podcast at www.thertoshowpodcast.com. You can hit me up directly at pete@thertoshowpodcast.com. Email, let me know what's going on. You can also go on there and get some swag. It helps out the show. And then we're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, where you can subscribe, where you can see this. Mike, it's always a pleasure. Hopefully we see you very, very soon. You guys are doing wonderful things out there in Ohio, and I really, really want to tell you, I wish for your successes. I love it. I appreciate all you do with the business.
thanks, Pete. Appreciate you having me back on.
Absolutely. And I'm going to tell you guys, as always, make sure you get your collections low, get your sales high. Have a great one.